Well, remember, we were given a story for 6 or 7 months now. Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, went on 60 Minutes and said this was the best run election in Georgia history. Not true. When you go get his documents, what do we have? Last night, we were able to get all the documents he used for what we call a risk-limiting audit. This occurred last November. It was the first of 2 actions where Georgia said, we're confident in the ballot results of the November election that Joe Biden beat President Trump. Well, when you look at the ballot results that they got from Fulton County, which is the big epicenter of voting in Atlanta, right? Covers a big city. It's the largest percentage of vote in the state by a mile. When they went through the audit, they saw all sorts of crazy things, starting off with a remarkable thing. There were ballots that were scanned multiple times, like 24 times, batches of 100, 200 ballots were scanned double times. There was a second thing. They had a sequence of votes where 5 different batches of votes each came out to the exact same total right after the other. 1, 2, 3, 4. Joe Biden, 360 plus votes. Donald Trump, only 90 votes, and the Libertarian got 3 votes. The mathematical probability of that happening is 0. Even the state says that's a problem. There's votes that should have been, that weren't counted or should have been counted and got counted. Then there is a gap in the records, and it's a big gap. It's like the 19-minute tape on the Nixon Watergate tapes. There are 150 blocks of absentee ballots that are logged in. They get a number, but on the paper that they use for the audit, by the way, they don't show being counted. They're gone. They're not on there. They went to a machine, but the machine tallies don't show that they were counted. That's 15, 20,000 votes. Now, let's keep in mind the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in the state was about 13,000, a little less than 13,000 by the final audit.
So this was outcome determinative.
It potentially can be. There's certainly enough votes. The votes in question are larger than the votes of the lead. Now, they'd have to break all Donald Trump for the rate. But the assurances we were given that everything was okay in Dodge wasn't. It's not true. Now, that's the first thing. That's out there now. People can look at the documents, can read it. Tonight, 3-4 hours from now, we're going to break part 2 of this story. Secretary of State Raffensperger had a contractor that he sent specifically to Fulton County. Listen, everybody knows that in Georgia, Fulton County is sort of the black sheep of the voting family. It's had lots of problems over the years where tallies are not right, votes are missing, employees are problematic, and so it's always had an eye on it. There's always been, but in this case here, something pretty significant happened. He sends a guy there to watch, and that guy watches for a while, and what does he see? He sees double scanning of ballots, suitcases with election materials walking out with no one even knows who the person is that walked out with it or walked in with it. He sees an episode. There is a report of an episode. The muscle that's brought in, the people that are going to run the machines, they're observed in the elevator by an election observer, and it's reported to him that they're intending to come up and mess things up. They actually use a lot more colorful language, but we won't use that on air. You can imagine the words they might have used, but they're talking about coming in and making a mess of the election, intending to. Now, were they joking? We don't know, but I'll tell you what, when you look at the document, 29 pages of errors, mismanagement, mistakes, grotesque running of an election. It was completely chaotic.
So these 29 pages, what was the date of this report?
November.
Wow. So
Georgia state officials have known about it for 5, 6, 7 months.
So Brad Raffensperger, in this phone call that the Democrats made a huge stink about with President Trump, he knew at that point when he was saying that nothing is wrong with Georgia, he knew at that point the contents of this memo.
Without doubt, his office knew. It would be shocking that he wouldn't read the report of the man he sent there. And so, Brad Raffensperger has to say, now, let's keep in mind, I want to be fair to him as well. He has always said he was worried about Fulton County. He didn't think Fulton County did a good job. But you can't go on national television and say this was the best run election when you have a 29-page report laying out litany after litany of extraordinary oversights, mismanagement, people not understanding, scanning ballots twice, losing ballots. It's just, it reads like a how not to do an election manual when you look at this 29 pages.
And we had so many other people like Bill Barr even, and now Liz Cheney, right before she was outvoted, saying, this was the best run election ever. And some people who didn't even talk to a single witness, they didn't look at a single piece of evidence. And you have somebody like Brad Raffensperger, whose office had actually seen the evidence, telling the Georgia state legislature this was the best run election ever. And so I think people are wondering then, what happens now?
It's a great question. I think the thing to watch for is, does the Secretary of State go take some action to remove the top officials of Fulton County. In my story today that I did with Daniel Payne, he's quoted as saying, "I want the top officials of Fulton County out. They're not removing them, but I want them out." There's a new law that was passed in Georgia that allows for the state to come in and take over a problematic election district. Will he exercise that law? Some people say that's under discussion right now. That could be the first round of accountability, right? The second round of accountability is going to come Monday. There's a court hearing by the private attorney who forced the audit, the unsealing of the absentee ballots, which, by the way, has been going on very quietly. It mirrors exactly what we reported in our story. We talked to Bob Cheeley, the lawyer. It matches exactly what we're finding in our thing. He's going to ask for deposition power, which means that people are going to have to raise their hand now in Fulton County, if he gets that, and answer questions under oath. Will they? Will they take the Fifth Amendment? We don't know, but that is the next round of accountability. Those two things I think are going to happen very quickly next week. The third question is, does the Georgia State Legislature say, we want those documents and we want to find out where are those 150 batches? What precincts were they in? One of the odd things in the notes of this contractor when he's observing is there's a low volume of information going out and back from the north part of the county. What's that? Does that mean? That's the Republican part of the county. Were they suppressing votes out there? I don't know, but he thought it was important enough to write it in his report. There is a roadmap for lawmakers if they want to exercise their constitutional duty in Georgia to go get these documents and find out what happened.
So two quick follow-up questions. One, how many ballots are actually in a batch?
100. So if you have 150, you get 15,000. If you have that group, now the group that had the identical count was 600 or 700 ballots. So if you do that 4 or 5 times, you start to get much bigger numbers. There are a lot of ballots. There are thousands and potentially a couple tens of thousands of ballots that are in question here. And that's only from our work. You know, get a real expert, a forensic expert, who knows what else they're going to find.
Like what they're trying to do in Arizona.